Hi, welcome to Podlygamists, the Sister Wives Rewatch podcast.
Sister Wives is a reality show centered on a Mormon polygamous family originating in Lehi, Utah. Over 12 years and 16 seasons, TLC's longest-running reality show tells the story of Cody Brown and his 4 wives, Mary, Janelle, Christine, and Robin, and their journey as spouses and parents living plural marriage in the public eye. As superfans, we have watched the family as they grow and overcome challenges, endure numerous moves, face loss, and celebrate all the moments in between. We love the Brown family, and fresh off some major changes following season 16, we decided to go back to the beginning and embark on the ultimate rewatch so that we could see the early days with fresh eyes and try to draw connections between the Brown family of 2010 and where we are today. I'm Samantha Kaiser.
And I'm Haley Graff.
And this is Podlygamists, Season 1 bonus episode, Analyzing Parasocial Relationships.
Yeah. Welcome back to our very special bonus episode on parasocial relationships. Because why not?
Nailed it.
What made us do this? I'm trying to remember.
Well, one day I brought it up in one of the episodes.
Okay.
Talking about the fanship.
Yeah. Okay.
For the Brown family, and I called it a parasocial relationship. And then we got to talking about what that is.
Yeah.
And then just started going from there. We kind of like went off on a tangent for a little bit that I had to cut a little bit for time, but which is fine because we're now doing a bonus episode on just that.
Cool. Yeah, that would make sense because I have like kind of alluded to. I'm more on the fan boards and stuff like that because I have Facebook where they're mostly located. Excuse me, and you're not on Facebook, so I think I'm just like reporting back to you on a lot of like the intensity of the fanship that I see on those pages, to put it like kindly, I guess, and like that crazy phenomenon of people who like feel like they know this family inside and out and all their motivations and all their personality and their flaw. Like people seem to feel like on these like fan pages, I'm sure for any kind of fanship it's similar, but what I noticed on these fan pages on Sister Wives is like how hard it is for me as like a person who's like, I think approach it more like they're interesting and I look at them like a fan, like a normal human family with issues and with good and bad qualities, and like, you know what I mean? That's kind of, I'm a little more like observational with it, and they're just like in it as if they are the ones in these conflicts and in this family, and like they know better than maybe the characters, the family, the Brown family themselves in some cases. So just that, and then when you proposed or told me about that term I'd never heard of, it was like that, like put a label on it that was really satisfying. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying like we're just kind of taking a closer look at that as it pertains to the show and like life.
It's just a really interesting thing to talk about, I think, like, until you really do put that, and I only recently heard that term, too, from a friend, like, I didn't really think about it too much, but until it was brought up, like, I do realize how much people online or characters on TV shows and stuff do actually, I mean, as much as I'm not, like, trying to be weird in any way about it, but you do form those connections, like, unconsciously, and they do mean a lot to you, like, so you have a lot of thoughts and opinions and feelings about people that you're spending your time watching their lives.
Yeah. So, I mean, I did a little bit of like a deep dive on like research just to inform myself because, like I said, it was a brand new term for me when we brought it up a few episodes ago. And it's interesting. It's really interesting because at first I was thinking like it has to do with, when I think of it, it's like just a little like overview made me think of how I feel about like podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm listening to a lot of the same ones for many years. So like it's very easy for me to feel like these are people I know their voice, I know their sense of humor. I can predict kind of what they're going to say sometimes because they have, like, for example, I love Armchair Expert, and some of the Dax's jokes and questions and interviews, I'm like, and now he's going to say, I bet you were a middle child, because he's always doing, that's something he's just doing all the time, and like, I'm like, oh, Dax, like me and like,
oh, Dax, classic Dax.
And that's kind of what made me think like this is definitely something I relate. I mean, outside of Sister Wives, but like that's the strongest connection I feel like I have with characters that
For
aren't.
sure. I mean, thinking of myself, like, hold on, Kevin's crawling on my keyboard here. Get down, bud. Okay, there you go. Thinking of myself, I have like a couple different people on YouTube that I really enjoy watching, um, who like their vlogs and stuff bring like a lot of comfort and just like a chill vibe that you really just kind of need sometimes after a long day. So those I really look forward to those kind of things. And then yeah, like podcasts, I like the True Crime podcast, and That's Why We Drink, and that has um, two people co-hosts in it who are close to my age. They're around 30, and so I mean they're millennials, and they make all the same references of TV shows like Hey Arnold and Nickelodeon stuff from growing up and all of that. So I mean it feels very familiar. And yeah, when you've been listening to them for a while, you do feel like you know them. You do feel like they're your friends. Like,
Yep, it is. Yeah, for sure. Um, I guess I didn't realize, like, on initial like consideration, like how widespread, because the terms, the term, I guess the definition I should read, when I looked at parasocial relationships, is a one-sided relationship with a media that a media user engages in with a media person. So like me being the media user and the media persona being like a member of the Brown family, Dax Shepard on Armchair Expert. But it's not just real people, and they're like my podcasts are not in fiction, and the Sister Wives, is like nonfiction. It's probably heavily produced. I'm sure it's not like totally organic, but
yeah.
Um, so the next thing that I was kind of like, as I was getting into the definition and understanding just the term itself, is that it's not inherently bad, just an inevitable result of media consumption. And something I noticed in doing this research is that almost all these articles were between October 2021 and December 2021. So wrapping up,
Really?
we're coming to like a close on year one of our pandemic, basically. Like a year of the biggest, like most serious lockdowns that we went through, I guess, was like in that time period. I mean, it was early, really March was the most serious part.
The pre-vaccine and everything. Yeah.
The vaccine, a lot of people still taking it seriously, as in like I'm not leaving
Mm-hmm.
the house unless necessary, that kind of thing. And that's, I guess, when people started talking about it more. I mean, it's a term that's been around since the 50s, which shocked me as well.
Oh, wow, okay. That's
Were we so connected to?
That's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought it'd been around that long. Holy crap.
I know that's exactly what I noted, but yeah. So getting into that a little bit more, the article, and I should say the article I read was mostly on verywellmind.com. I did some Wikipedia, some others, but mostly coming from verywellmind.com. They had the most, I felt, in-depth article going over it and the history of this term. So this could be a parasocial relationship with a celebrity, live action, fictional characters, social media influencer, anime characters, and any other figure they encounter through movies, TV shows, podcasts, radio, talk shows. And I wrote in my own little commentary, the podcast of yesteryear for radio talk shows.
Radio.
And then social media.
First podcast.
Right? And then anybody on a social media platform. So even just a person that you like, what comes to mind, Kristen Bell. She's not per se an influencer. She doesn't like make her money off of being an influencer and talking at her phone, but like she's got a big presence on social media. She shares a lot about her life. And you could feel like from that, and I kind of do, like that I know her too.
Jennifer Garner.
Jennifer Garner is another great one. She has a great Instagram. It's like a very much like a Upworthy or like one of those like positive news. Her feed is kind of like one of those feeds.
As you always refer to her when we bring her up, America's sweetheart, Jennifer Garner.
Well, someone argued Kristen Bell is also America's sweetheart. So actually those two examples are they're kind of counterintuitive. But
there can be more than one America's sweetheart.
Three America's sweethearts. So yeah. So basically, like, this is a phenomenon that happens not just with reality figures or real, quote unquote, real people, but characters on TV shows, both like dramatized, like acted, and animated. Which the animated part just took it a hair farther than I was like, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and then the animated, I was like, yeah. I don't know if I take it that far. But I guess kids, you could say a kid feels that kind of connection.
Maybe a kid, yeah.
And I'm sure adults,
And,
I could relate to it more as kids are like, I love SpongeBob. SpongeBob is my friend.
yeah.
Winnie the Pooh, I don't know. Those are my.
Yeah, I mean, thinking like SpongeBob and Squidward, like those are
Mhm.
like their dynamic and stuff you could maybe, as a child, really connect with. Or yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really watch like I
Yeah.
haven't seen really any anime or anything, so I don't know
Mhm.
necessarily what that's like. But I suppose if the characters feel realistic enough, maybe.
Mhm.
So
I mean, yeah, that's a little bit more invested than I think I get. But maybe if I consumed more animation, I would feel differently. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, maybe if I did watch some, I would get it more. Who knows?
Yeah, I won't. Yeah, I won't disparage anime.
No,
Um,
I mean, like what you like.
um, and the research mainly focuses on like a relationship because when they say relationship, parasocial relationship, they mean like a relationship, and like a friendship, they mostly focus on a friendship relationship, which is I think how mostly I would relate. I would say I feel like I have a friendship with Dax Shepard. I feel like I have a friendship with the characters on like a show that I've watched a lot of times is Gilmore Girls, or like Friends. Friends is a big reference point in this article that I read from Very Well Mind, and also coincidentally a reference point that comes up when we like kind of when we're kind of getting some anecdotal information about it. And I can relate to. I have watched a lot of Friends, not so much that it went off Netflix, but like I have watched a lot of Friends as well, and I can feel that kind of like comfort with that when you just turn it on
Mhm.
to do something else. Um, so they focus on friendships, but it can actually get negative. It can be a negative relationship you feel like an enemy that you feel like you have with a genuine like feeling of dislike and distaste for the person.
Well, we had so I guess we could probably read Dalton G.
Oh,
His
okay.
so we have a listener, Dalton G, who has some thoughts on parasocial relationships, and he is actually fairly new to watching Sister Wives. Um, for the positive part of it, he's saying how he started turning it on while like cooking or doing dishes. Just kind of has it on in the background to listen to, and says how it's just sort of comforting, which that's obviously on the positive side. Like I think that's sort of why anybody likes tuning into stuff like this. I mean, like it's familiar, it is comforting. So, and he was saying with parasocial relationships, he's like, in some cases, I think they can be really positive or result in like a positive change or happiness and that kind of thing. He's like, I do feel like a lot of the time, though, it's easy to descend into like crossing a line of it being negative or negatively impacting your own mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
um, one example he kind of gave was that it can lead you to being a bit more prone to believing misinformation. So, I mean, using an example of like news pundits leaning one way or the other, whether or not they're accurate,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to believe the person on the news that you trust. You're going to take their word as truth.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that always happens is a different story. So, I mean, you would be prone to believing somebody that you trust, though, and that you enjoy watching. So that can veer into some negative areas there. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was an interesting point to bring up for sure.
The news pundit thing is interesting because for especially for the older generation, like I never watch cable news ever unless there's a big event happening. I think the last time I watched that maybe was the election, or
Hmm.
well, can't say that it was
Maybe stuff with like the war in Ukraine, though.
insurrection. But oh yeah, my war information. I guess I don't really get like on cable TV. Anyways, but for people who turn on their cable news channel of choice every day and watch the same person, they have that very familiarity. And like as these recent years, when it seems like in recent years when opinions have become more polarizing and like maybe extremism has been getting more aggressive, those channels and those pundits have been getting more divided. Those seeds of trust were planted when things were different, when things were just
A
news.
little more balanced, probably.
And now the older generation been watching and listening to these people for many years now, and like they're just gonna trust what blank blank says, whatever
Yeah.
on channel, whatever. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, um, yeah, that's interesting how that it's almost like a grooming relationship, but like unintentional. They didn't. I mean, you could argue it could be intentional too.
You could argue it's intentional, which is another rabbit hole. But yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah. But
well, I mean, like you said, like it was planted like that. Those seeds of trust and and everything have been planted for a long time. So even if you are veering one extreme or the other, you are still along on the ride with them because you trust them, you like them, you feel connected to them.
yep. Um, the other kind of category of parasocial relationships that they get into is romantic. There's people who
Mhm.
have like true romantic feelings for characters, which like I think everybody can say they're attracted to an actor or something like that. But this is a different thing where they feel like wronged by the romantic wrongs this person does, or like
Huh.
jealous of the romantic relationship that they form on their fictional TV show, or so on. So that's another like love tier, I guess. There's sort of like the general negative, general positive slash friendship, and then like I don't know, neutral in there. I wouldn't say it's really positive or really negative. It's romantic, and it can I'm sure veer both ways.
So, I mean, now I'm thinking Friends examples, but but how many people were mad at Ross for we were on a break? I mean, how many people were pissed at him as though he cheated or not cheated on that? I guess, like mad on the behalf of Rachel, maybe in that. So, spoiler alert. I mean, I'm assuming everybody knows about Ross and Rachel. So, sorry.
It's that's a good example. It's also a the original airing is pre social media, so like I've heard stories from actors talking about how, like, for example, or on other examples, Game of Thrones, like they'll be stopped on the street. I never watched Game of Thrones, but like they do there's betrayals and things like that happen, and like they've been stopped on the street and yelled at by people who said, "How could you do this?" or "How could you?" I'm sure to David Schwimmer Ross, he was like, people were like, "How could you do that to Rachel?" And like maybe I guess I don't know if they're taking it as a personal, as if they are like kind of living vicariously through Rachel, or if they're just
It's like it hurts them like it hurt Rachel.
or they love Rachel as a friend, a parasocial friend, and they
Yeah.
look at him like someone who wronged their.
You can see it either way, I think.
Yeah, I wonder like how that typically goes. I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
It's super interesting, yeah, because you've talked about like people not really separating then the fictional characters from their
actor.
yeah, like the characters they play from the real life actor, which is quite different than in our case with like the Brown family, that these are their real, they're a real family, they're real life people. It's different, like playing a character and being yelled at for
Mm-hmm.
what is a scripted series.
So
That you're just doing your job.
yeah, I mean it's all someone's job. Someone's job to be at their income is coming from this reality show,
Yeah.
and there's someone's acting or someone's maybe animating. I don't know, but but it's funny because it seems at first glance you're like this is a wrong way to be. Like these are crazy people who do this, who have this
Mm-hmm.
inclination or whatever. And like what the extreme ends maybe are a little bit dip into like a different thing. Like I'm not saying like those who will assault someone as a result of the show, or like death threats, that kind of stuff is extreme and unhealthy in any context. So like let's just not separate that from like this consideration. But
Different level there. Yeah.
yes, if we're talking about like the middle of the bell curve of of people who like experience this, it's almost everybody. First of all, like we both said, we have similar feelings where we can relate to the phenomenon. But
Yeah.
just getting into like the psyche of like why this is interesting, because it's a little more like neutralizing. It's not like you have something wrong with you that you feel so connected. It's something else. So
Well, I think like I've read a lot. I don't know if you have it all, but I've read a lot of Brene Brown. I really enjoy her work, and she talks about one of her like more quoted thoughts is that we're, as humans, like we're hardwired for connection and to form empathetic connections with each other. So I mean, that's why like you're reading a book and the main character dies, or you cry, you know, I mean, because you genuinely do care. And I mean, it's even, I'd probably say from a lot of people is even more so seeing it in front of you on screen, not even just imagining it in your head with reading, that it is like it does really
Mm-hmm.
inflict a gut emotional reaction, because I mean you care, like you've built that connection because that's what our brains are wired to do.
Yeah. So they actually have something about that. So just so I can cover my butt with the history, this concept originated in 1956, which is what I said sooner than I would have ever guessed. But by Donald Horton and Richard Wall. So these are who we can credit for the term. Um,
Right.
but psychologically, this like phenomenon is much like face-to-face interaction. Parasocial interactions um, are, and there's two terms. There's a parasocial interaction and there's a parasocial relationship. And a parasocial interaction is only when you're actively engaging with the media. So like you're watching Friends and you're like feeling some way about whatever's happening. You're connecting with the joke or the situation or whatever. The parasocial relationship is when that carries out of your real time interaction with the media. So like if you're still thinking about that thing that rusted as you're falling
Oh,
asleep at night, or if you're like walking around the next day and thinking about how you really wish Jess or Rory would have ran away with Jess when he showed up at Harvard, like
which they
whatever.
kind of did.
If you're still thinking and feeling about it, probably mostly even not just pondering it like interesting plot point, but like feeling a type of way about whatever's happened, that's when it turns into a relationship. Um,
Oh, that's an interesting distinction.
yeah, and it maybe like makes you feel like a little more normal. And you're like, oh, of course I'm engaging with the media when I'm watching it. Like that's the hopefully that's
I mean,
cool, right?
unless you're just zoning out with it in the background, really. I mean, I don't think you're. I think you're invested in some way. You watch a storyline.
Right. So, and there you'll see some articles where they kind of interchange those terms, but I think it is kind of an important distinction. Um,
Yeah, that's really interesting.
so um, then a specialist named Gail Stever added the concept of parasocial attachment as well. So that's based on the theory of attachment. If you learned in psych, like how like especially children connect with caregivers, that kind of theory. And when deep bonds are formed between, like when a deep bond is formed between a parent and child, or caregivers and children, and that happens when media persona becomes a source of comfort, felt security, and safe haven. And that
Hmm.
is something I think anybody who has like repeatedly binge watched The Office or like Friends or any of that, like that, and the term feels like unhealthy. Like you think it sounds unhealthy, like attachment, like I'm attached to this, but like I don't think it is per se. It just talks about feeling like soothed by something that is familiar, right? Like
Don't we all like that? I mean, you know, that's why you that is why you rewatch your favorite shows and movies. That is why you reread your favorite books. That's,
mm-hmm,
I mean, it's why you do things that you like, even just outside of like, media consumption or anything like that. You repeatedly do things that bring you comfort.
mm-hmm.
So,
And that's the next thing I have is like it's an important component of attachment is the proximity seeking. In parasocial relationships, this means that you're like watching and rewatching particular programs or keeping up on social media, or in my case, why I've probably stuck with Sister Wives for 12 years or however long it's been now is like, well, I haven't really this is the first time I've really fully rewatched the show besides maybe random
yeah,
on TLC
reruns or
channel
something that
when
have been
I was
on.
younger.
Yeah.
But it's still the same family that I like am familiar with and comforted by, and the kind of events that you've been following through their lives and that kind of thing. So
Well, yeah, I mean, I was using that as an example, like looking at the kids of the family. I mean, us especially like watching back and seeing how, like we mentioned in the first episode, how little Savannah was,
Mm-hmm.
and like you just feel this sort of like connection because you're like you've watched them grow up essentially, even though we've never met them and probably never will. But I mean, you still are like, I've watched your whole childhood. Like, of course I care about you. You know, that's it. It's just how could you not?
Yeah, yeah, it's familial for sure. Um, and then we kind of get into the hows of this, like. And it's a lot like you were saying too. You're on like totally. I don't know if you did like research or if you just like made that connection, but it's like impressively close to,
Mm.
to the science.
That's my smarts. I'm just very intelligent.
Um, so again, it mirrors in-person relationships. Parasocial relationships start when the media user, um, and it starts with the media user and when they get acquainted with a media persona. If the interaction leads to media user continuing to think about the after media persona after interaction, it can lead to a parasocial relationship, and obviously this strengthens by more interactions. So the more you continue to rewatch and watch Parks and Rec, The Office, the stronger that connection becomes. Seems obvious, but like I feel that. I feel like the more times I've watched it, I'm like, ah, yes, like this is when Dwight they go to Shroot Farms and they go into that room and it's the irrigation room and how funny and clever, like how cute. Love
I
it.
mean, I have a friend, the friend who brought up that mentioned parasocial relationships was like, I reread the books I love because I want to be amongst friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the way he phrased it, and I was like, that's such a like lovely way to put it, you know?
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to like. I mean, I feel like I've hammered on this point, but it's not a. It's not a neuroses. It's just like
No.
it just makes sense. And
And prior to kind of deep diving in it a little bit more, I feel like I at least kind of thought it was a little bit.
mm-hmm.
Like I was like, oh, it's like this weird, unhealthy attachment to
Yeah.
people online or influencers or reality TV show, you know. But it's basically just our brains working the way they're set up to work and forming empathetic connections and caring. And I think anytime you really care about something, unless you act on it in such a weird way, which obviously can happen in relationships and shit like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're most of the time when you're genuinely caring about something, that is a positive thing.
Yeah. I mean, to a point, of course, but that's kind of
I
so.
mean, there's a line to cross,
Yeah.
but as long as you don't cross that line.
I mean, the line. I mean, part of what we're gonna talk about is the line gets crossed and it gets weird and unhealthy. But just before we get into that, I just want to like lay the groundwork of like we're not. It's not. It's not as something as that you need to be so inclined to like judge about yourself or about others. You know. Um. So, just jumping ahead a little bit. So this may seem strange, but humans are wired for social connection, and media is a relatively recent development that fools our natural inclination for connection with faces and people. So, like, our brains have not evolved to distinguish between faces and voices on TV versus the person face to face, um, which is why like it's such a natural like just like evolutionary bond that is formed like to survive, and your brain doesn't know I mean intellectually you know like I know I know you now are not here with me, but
Yeah.
I mean you're a real person I'm talking to through a screen, but you know I know that, but like I guess like the basic like raw connection that is part of your brain doesn't discern, and so a lot of the same mechanisms are like triggered to like build a connection.
That's really, and that explains why the term has gained popularity with COVID and isolation, being in quarantine. I mean, look at people who've lived alone, turning to Netflix, turning to YouTube, podcasts, anything for company, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes all the sense in the world.
It's not even
Why?
really artificial. It's like I mean, it's artificial
Yeah.
in that the problem lies in that people start giving themselves to mentally and emotionally to these characters that cannot give,
Who are not giving back.
not
Yeah.
like, meaningfully give back or not truly give back. They do, and I'm sure they do in ways like with comedy you can laugh, and with like a thoughtful if you can kind of like vicariously live through a thoughtful interaction and like you feel like love and compassion for the situation, like that's healthy. It's just
But I mean, Michael Scott is not going to text me and
replace.
be like, "How are you doing?"
Yes,
You know?
they can't replace true social interaction. It's kind of like
Yeah.
the headline at the end of that article,
Yeah.
but it talks a lot about how COVID-19 increased interest in social surrogacy. Like that's like their term they threw out there. Um, and it's positive because parasocial relationships lead to real life connections with other like-minded people. So, while your obsession with sister wives may be isolating if you're just watching it on TV, when you go to seek out the fanships and the podcast and the things like that, it connects you with other people, other real people who have a connection and a like mind and a like interest. So it's kind of
Yeah.
a building block for real connection too, if you want to be if you look at it.
Yeah, it's a good stepping stone for that. I mean, you and I were friends and everything before talking about Sister Wives, but obviously we have a lot more conversations now revolving around the show and ideas with it that has helped us to like deepen conversations that we have and strengthen like our friendship and stuff. And I mean, that is because of the show. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's because of my comfort and consistency with Sister Wives that they've just been consistent since I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, current day. Like I've been following with them, and that has led me to do something I've always wanted to do, which is start a podcast. And
yeah.
I mean, I haven't always wanted.
I mean, that's an awesome
Yeah,
thing, a positive result from a parasocial relationship with a family in originating in Utah. That
Utah, Nevada, and then Arizona.
yeah, I mean, across the country from us, but
And then the kind of the caveat being too is like then if the person who you formed a parasocial relationship with, so the media persona, the Brown family, um, Rory Gilmore, Dwight Schrute, if that person dies on the show, I mean, if a reality star dies, they die in real life, and that is something to mourn. That is not the same thing. But when the character dies or just the show ends, your psychology, your kind of like process is like a breakup, is like a genuine breakup, and you go through grieving, and you go through the loss of a friendship. In some cases, people feel romantically about the characters, um, and they research shows that people respond to the loss of a parasocial relationship much the way they would respond to a social relationship. Which is, I mean, I remember watching the last episode of The Office on TV. This was before streaming was big. I think we had Netflix, but it wasn't what it is now.
And you were paying like for the DVDs to be sent to you, kind of deal.
Essentially, right? The mail, and it wasn't seasons of The Office as far as I know of.
Yeah.
And I cried, and I was so sad, and I was sad. I remember feeling happy and sad for the events of the episode, how Michael comes back, how Dwight and Angela get married, how all these loose ends tie up. I loved that for the characters because I was connected to them. But I was so sad that I was not going to get another episode of The Office. And this was before you could just easily keep rewatching the episodes over and over again. So I can like relate to that sense. Yeah, for sure. It's
yeah, because I mean, you don't want to just, even when it is fictional, you don't want to just have the story stop. Like you want your relationship, so to speak, to just continue. Like we're friends for life. Damn it, I want to still see you. Like
yeah, and friendships break up, and like romantic relationships break up, and like it's a grieving process that you go through on some level, and like. Again, if we're looking at like the real negative turn is when that connection has become too real to the media user, the viewer, and that's something like that sends you into a true depression that lasts more than with the show. I mean, with the show ending, I would hope you're not depressed for more than a day. That seems even like a long time. But you can still feel pangs of like, oh man, I wish I could watch that again.
Well, I'll use this example that one of our friends is reading The Hunger Games for the first time.
Hmm.
Have you read The Hunger Games?
Yeah, a long time, like middle school,
Okay.
but yeah.
Well, I remember reading the last book of The Hunger Games, and I guess I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it or anything, even though they've been out for like a decade. So, but after reading that last book and like the characters that you lose and stuff in there, I felt very down having read that. Like it felt like a true loss in my own life. And I mean, even though it wasn't, nothing changed in my life, but it it affected you, you know, you care, and losing characters and dealing with the emotions that they've had to deal with, like it hits you right in the heart, you know.
Well, that's that prolonged exposure again too. It's like you've had
Mhm.
several books to follow these characters and return to
Mhm.
them. Harry Potter is a big example. I feel like a lot of people can relate
Oh
to.
God, I mean, how many times you've cried reading Harry Potter and watching the movies?
And watching the movies, yeah. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like besides like that's kind of my like little book report I have about the topic, but I also have notes on um, how we draw this back to Sister Wives and the fan ships. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to pull out before we get into that.
I mean, I have like several examples that I jotted down about particularly the Brown family. Um, one, well, I guess I'll start with the Mary one.
Yeah.
And so again, if people aren't caught up, spoiler alert ahead for future present day. But fans of the show and of the family, one sticking point that people get very, very passionate about is that Mary and Cody don't have really a relationship present day. I mean, they're working on maybe a friendship, but it's rocky at best, I'd say. And a lot of people are rooting for Mary to leave Cody. And I get it. I mean, because it doesn't, it makes people feel upset because it doesn't feel like it fits into like how they're projecting what she should want with quotes. Um, so people get mad at her like it's someone in our own life that you're like a friend that you're like, leave him, damn it, he's
Yeah.
no good for you, you know.
Mhm.
Except, you know, Mary's like, this actually is what I'm choosing, and you know, this is what's best for me. But people project what they would do or what they would want a friend to do in her shoes, and so that's a real contentious thing in the fan base. I think that's a kind of example of where people get very angry and opinionated.
When you gotta think that feeds the like vitriol towards Cody too is like they
Mhm.
feel loyal to Mary on some level, and so that like helps them demonize Cody further and further, and recently demonize Robin further and further,
Mhm.
because they look at those two as like the source of Mary's pain, or um,
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that in there too, that like people kind of attack Robin like she sort of stole Cody, or you know, she's having this maniacal plot to get him away and have him be all hers, or you know, whatever people are saying.
yeah, a lot of that. I was gonna pull some comment. So I told you, and I planned to pull some comments off the discussion boards, but it just kind of was like as I'm looking at them, like, I don't want to repeat these and like put light on them per se, and a lot of them I did write. I kind of just like summarized an interaction I mistakenly had on those pages because
Oh no,
I try.
that's a good
I'm
question.
very much a lurker on these pages. I really don't participate. I like a few things. Um,
Hmm.
I've tried to like slide the podcast in there a few times. You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to promote yourself on the pages. That's like some of the rules. But I try to like, oh, if you want to talk more about this, listen to this. But I did. There was an interaction I had screenshot and sent to you a while back. Um,
Hmm.
some comment that
Yeah.
someone made about one of the wives' kids specifically about a negative comment about all the kids in the one family. I'm like, first of all, that's just total baloney. Like, you can't like point a finger at all of this one wife's kids, like as if they all are just trash. Like that's just, anyways, on a reality show that they didn't choose to be on with adults.
Hmm.
So, anyways, that's besides the point. One of the rules on the one page I don't hate, that in case you're curious, the Sister Wives Brown Family Discussion fan group is well monitored, and they don't allow any negative talk about the kids at all. None of the kids. It's deleted if they find it. It gets deleted. I didn't know that yet, and someone made this comment, and I felt like I just, for some reason, I felt inclined to comment. I never do this. But
I know, it's someday, like, there are just some things that just get you going, and you're like, I have to say something.
I'll be like, this is bullshit, I need to tell you. So I commented, I don't think the kids should be criticized here. That's all I said. And the person responded literally, all they wrote was, I do! Exclamation point. Wow, okay. Like,
okay, but I mean, this could, I would go into a rabbit hole and I won't, but I mean, you as an adult should know better than to be picking on a child. Like, that's not okay.
Children on a reality show that you don't know and that you see, like, generously 5% of their life. I really avoid the fan pages for the most part. I enjoyed this Sister Wives Brown Family Discussion because it's moderated by
Moroni Lopez Jessup. Oh my god, I just said it wrong. Is it Moroni? Moroni? Because, okay, so we just want to extend an apology to Mr. Jessup, because I recently was listening. I listened to a song in Book of Mormon, and it pronounced the angel Moroni.
Oh.
And I was like, that's his name, and we've been pronouncing it Moroni. And I think we've probably been mispronouncing it.
I think it's Moroni. I don't know.
Moroni.
We could do that with a Google probably, but we're not going to.
Yeah. Right? So, to Mr. Jessup, if we've been saying your name wrong, again, no shade. We just are ignorant. So
it's no disrespect. It's just lack of awareness. So, like, apologies. Anyways,
if we get a chance to talk to you, correct us where we're wrong.
We'll straighten it out, I swear. And I'm not going to mix up the sequence of your 3 names that I get confused. Anyway, he's a moderator on the page that I like, along with some other, like, respectable people who aren't there. They're there to have, like, some of the conversation still gets, like, I think, inappropriate. But, like, for the most part, they keep the kids out of it. They filter all the posts, and then they like, control the comments to a point. So anyways, if you're going to look, that's the one I go to. Even so, I didn't care to. There's some way worse ones that just promote those gossip columns and things. But,
yeah.
But yeah, so I think there's some connection there that people have when they can get together with people who share their, like, it's like their mutual friend is the Brown family in this relationship, and these people all got together to discuss them. I guess just let their id, like, scream out about how they feel about it. Like, it's not, you know.
Well, I mean, I just think, like, in a positive route, even before we started this podcast, I mean, we watched the whole, a couple of seasons, at least, of Sister Wives before starting this podcast, and we'd just be texting each other the whole time, saying our thoughts and stuff as things are happening. So, I mean, that is that's a point of connection right there. And I'm sure other people are doing it too. And on the fan pages, not everybody. I mean, there's some, and Facebook kind of makes it easy to be just saying your opinion and having no consequences when you're rude or mean. Which again is a whole nother thing about the internet culture. But it does also allow people to just connect based on this phenomenon, this show that we're watching, this family that we all know, and, like, that's cool. You know, that's a good thing.
For sure.
Just as long as you're being respectful that these are other human beings and who have emotions too.
I mean, something you could say, both positive and negative. The thing that you mentioned earlier about how, like, perhaps, I mean, I wouldn't credit the fans with all of this, but, like, how it may be encouraged or strengthened Christine to leave, you know, gave her the reassurance to leave, basically. Like, at least I don't see, put it this way, I don't see any of those comments saying you should have stayed.
Yeah.
You know, they're all.
And I have seen a lot, like, on her on her like Instagram page, and like she's doing like a like kind of health stuff with Janelle that recently we kind of looked at, which I'm just so happy to see them doing anything together. So that's awesome. But all the comments really though on like those pages have been very positive and telling her, you know, you look great, you look so happy, I'm so proud of you, you're really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean that is kind of the way that like the parasocial relationship from the other side of it, of her getting kind of validation, encouragement and stuff. So like that's great for her. I mean,
But yeah, I mean, did you have anything, any other notes or anecdotes that you had collected?
so I have two other listener comments on parasocial relationships. So this is fun. We get to have some listener comments.
Engaged.
Um, First one is from Hannah S., who basically was just writing it saying who she enjoys for a parasocial relationship. Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye.
Well, I love
Doesn't he kind of seem like he'd be like such a great best friend, which I think is what she she says, I feel like he speaks the real truth. He doesn't take life completely seriously. Whenever I watch him, I feel like I can be myself and not have to worry about life around me. And he just makes me realize it's okay to be me and be proud of my past and things I've been through and use them as strengths instead of weaknesses. So that's pretty strong, I think, feeling for him. And another person she feels like that about is Mike Poser. She said his music just hits me, and a lot of the time when he's singing, I'm like, if I knew you in real life, we'd be good friends.
Mm-hmm.
Also loves the cast of Friends, because don't we all?
Yeah.
But saying, she's like, whenever I have bad days, it's like hanging out with friends, but you're not having to offer anything to them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because Cousin Danny, hashtag Cousin Danny,
I was gonna say that.
has said the same thing.
Yeah, it's funny because we have a parasocial relationship, I guess, with or we're the receiving end of it with my wonderful cousin who I grew up with and I have a real relationship with in real life. But
I have a lot of love and respect in a not weird way for Cousin Danny, just for listening.
she's a supporter and she listens and she never has and most likely never will watch this show Sister Wives, but she just likes listening. Just likes listening and being a part of a conversation that she doesn't have to participate in. So that was some feedback she gave me about the show, and I appreciate it very much. I'm trying to integrate hashtag Cousin Danny into some. I don't know that we've shouted her out yet. Maybe earlier in the couple episodes back, but
I think we have, yeah. But again, hashtag Cousin Danny represents
she represents
all goodness and support.
the supporters who don't support because they love the show of Sister Wives.
Right. But yes, I mean, I thought that was a really nice way to put it, that Hannah S. said. So that was cool. And then Jenna S., another S, has said she really likes influencers. She's saying, like, for influencers, I think it's how they bring you along with their life. Like, there's a huge difference between how I perceive an influencer that just shows, like, a fraction of their lives, and then ones that do a full-on vlogging style. She likes more, like, the vlogging style. She's like, the way they talk to you feels like you're talking to a friend. It's like you're FaceTiming a friend as they're cooking dinner, or you're, like, going on a shopping trip in Target. It feels like they're bringing you along. So, again, that's, like, the company aspect of it, that you feel like they're talking to you, you know, like.
That's kind of what I have for it. I think that kind of covers what we wanted to cover in as far as Paris.
Yeah, I think so.
Not really Sister Wives heavy episode, but relevant in like how you consider your like as a fan. Because the funny thing is, I think until I learned this term, I just called it was all just a fandom to me. Like I grew up with girls who hardcore loved Hunger Games. They wore Hunger Games t-shirts. They were very like passionate about anything that PETA did or whatever. They were team PETA or they were team whatever the other guy.
Gail.
Same with Twilight. There was teams. There were serious
oh yeah.
It's ironic. Strong feelings about one side or the other.
Yeah.
Or another one that there was one girl. I won't name, and she'll never really hear this, but there's one girl who I went to, I think it's mostly middle school. She loved Zac Efron. She loved Zac Efron so
Mm-hmm.
much that she had a anniversary with him as from the day that she like first saw him on I think probably High School Musical. She celebrated
Oh,
his birthday, and it was like a cute middle school like obsession, but went so far, and it was so intense and went on for like years. It was like, oh, and today
oh man.
anniversary of when I discovered Zac Efron. And yeah, that's so a
I
lot
don't mean to laugh, but oh boy,
it, it was something. Um so
that's a different
anyway,
level.
but that back then I just said I just would refer I'm like they are hardcore fans. I was is what I
Mm-hmm.
would think. They're like the fandom. Taylor Swift has a similar intense following, especially among like younger girls, I feel like. Um
Mm.
just a deep, strong, die diehard connection to a thing they're a fan of, and I guess now I would say that's an intense parasocial relationship. So the more
Yeah,
you know, better words you have, the more clearly you can identify a thing and explain it. I think
yeah.
so. Yeah, thanks for our very first special.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna be working on getting man. We have to start our book club for Under the Banner of Heaven next week. I suppose that means. So gotta get going on that.
I
But
will get some discussion questions out probably before this episode airs. So I mean, by
cool,
the time this airs, they'll already be out for Instagram. But
awesome.
just some questions if anybody wants to think about if they want to write in or have an opinion or anything like that.
So look out for that, and please give us any thoughts and opinions you have as you read along. There's a lot to learn about the foundation of Mormonism. There's a lot to learn about the context of polygamy. There's a lot to learn about this true crime if that's what you're in it for. Which like that's I'm really excited to discuss just the crime element. Well, thanks again. You can follow along with Book Club on the Instagram, which is at Podlygamispod. You can email us at podlygamispod. We have a YouTube page where you can comment at podlygamispod. Or if you, I think you have to search like the Podlygamist channel, Podlygamist Pod channel on YouTube to find it. I've noticed. Yeah.
If you type in Podlygamist Pod, the videos should pop
Okay.
up, I think.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So find us wherever works for you and let us know what you think. Yeah, we appreciate you.